Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chassidus in the morning. 15 minutes, change your life. Mayim Rabim from the Rabbi. They said in his room. Okay, basically, we ended off yesterday in a question like this. Now, what we were saying, so we're saying something very interesting. First of all, we explained in the Mayim, what does it mean, Mayim Rabim, where the financial concerns, things that stress you out, that seemingly take you away from connecting to Hashem. But where we said that Mayim Rabim lo yachlu chabei cannot extinguish it, so it can't take away that love that we have for Hashem. And even though it seems to the contrary, we're saying really it can't, and we discussed that. And then we said not just that it can't take away the love for Hashem, even more, it adds to the love. But that's the whole purpose. The whole purpose of them is to get you close to God. And we said even more that what we achieve through the Mayim Rabim is a level of Baal Teshuvah, or Teshuvah, level Baal Teshuvah. We said b'makom shebal Teshuvah imdim, tzaddik gemurim einam yichayim lamed. The place where Baal Teshuvah stands, the tzaddik gomer is not able, it's not in his realm of reality to have to be there. And we said so that means that what is achieved by the neshama coming down into this physical world and having to deal with the Mayim Rabim is that it reaches this level above from where it came from. And what we're going to explain today is what is above the connection, what is above over there, because on neshama, we're talking about the level of the neshama as it is one with Hashem. So how can, what higher level is there than the neshama as it is source in Atzmos? There's nothing higher than Atzmos. Atzmos is God's essence. Chas Hashem to say there's something else, something higher than Atzmos. So if there's nothing higher than Atzmos, then what are we achieving over here? And that's what we're going to explain today. I guess I'll explain it outside and then we'll go inside. So essentially, what we're going to explain is, of course, there's nothing higher than Atzmos. And of course, we can't reach a higher level. But he explains it's like Lamashal, the difference between potential and actual. Meaning like this. Let's say, for example, a person has a business proposition. I have an idea how I'm going to open up a restaurant, let's say in Crown Heights, and it's going to be a Chinese restaurant. There's no Chinese restaurants here at the moment. It's going to be a Chinese restaurant. It's going to make all this money, and I have this planned out exactly. I know what to do. I know what to make. I know who to hire. I know to do all these things. Now, we can all agree that on that level, it's the emotional investment is not so high. There's a little bit. But when it comes to actually making the restaurant, and let's say a person has the idea, he knows it can be successful, and they know they're going to make a good restaurant, it's going to work. But it hasn't actually happened. But versus actually doing it, those two scenarios are polar, distant from each other. Even though it's the same idea. Well, it's like, let's say, for example, in a shidduch, you're going out with somebody, and all makes sense and all works out and emotionally you're connecting and everything's working. There's, and it makes sense. And it comes to you and it says, for example, when I was dating my wife, very early on, I said to myself, this is the one. Now, from that point to when it comes to saying, hey, we're actually going to get married, saying that is very intense. Why is it very intense? I already know this is the right one, because one is it's potential and one is actual. And this is what we're going to say. The fact that the neshama, what does it reach by it coming down here, is that even though in potential, the neshama in Shemayim, when it's connected to Hashem, Hashem says, listen, I'll send you down there. You're going to be successful. You're going to have to deal with all these Mayim Rabim, but you're going to succeed in the end. You're going to become Baal Teshuvah. But you haven't actually become a Baal Teshuvah. That's the point. You haven't actually reached it. It's only once you actually here in this world and do it, is when it's done, when it has that value. It's like the business idea. Only once you actually implement the business idea, it's actually valued. It's the same idea, which is one is the idea in potential, one is the idea in actual. Well, let's see. Hey. Now, although even though this also the neshama is in God's essence, which is higher than all revelations, like it's proven from what it says. With who did God ask to create the world? b'nishmeseim shel tzadikim. Meaning, before there's any creation, before there's any type of creation, the neshamas of tzadikim were there. Sha'inyan hamlacha, this idea of rulership, to create hugam ala giluim achinaylim. So talking about even the highest level, meaning it's everything that above everything, to create everything, meaning to create our physical world. Not just this is the last step in the whole process. The process starts with the first symptom. So before there was even any symptom, before there's any, so to speak, a place that didn't have an existence of God, meaning there's, in the place where there's just God, the neshamas tzadikim are also there. Because, like it says in the brackets, because that then those neshamas are from the level of ratzain. In his will, it wasn't forced. Move on. These neshamas Hashem spoke to about creating the world. Above all revelations. Nevertheless, still we can say Teshuvah, through Teshuvah, and through meaning through that neshama, that it's above all revelations, level of ratzain, and not doesn't have to be there. And Hashem chooses us, and He wants us, and this is above every revelation. Nevertheless, when it comes down to this physical world, through that, it elevates it to a level that higher than what it was in its source, which is a phenomenal idea how to say this. So how can we understand this? Because there's nothing higher than Atzmos. So the view of Alpi Mashakasa, Rabbi Magid, we'll explain a parable. It's a little bit cryptic. Follow along. Viewers and Alpi Mashakasa, Rabbi Magid. In this, we understood according to what the Magid says. The Peirush and explaining what does it say. It says Yisrael, old Machshava, that the Yisrael, the Yidden, they came up on Hashem's mind. Meaning, like for example, Adam Sheish Ben. So let's say a person has a son. What happens? Father grows up, his son grows up, his son leaves, goes away. Let's say he goes to yeshiva. But nevertheless, even though the son is gone, the image of the son is ingrained in the father's mind. It's not like the son comes back after a year and he's like, "Who are you? I don't know who you are." He knows it's his son. It's ingrained within him, this image of his father. Hello, but in this mashal shebnei Adam shaykh zedaf b'mi sheish leben. So the story is like this. He's saying like this. It's a very deep concept. He's saying that when the father has his son around, the son leaves. Now, even though he leaves, the son is edged in the mind of the father. He still remembers the son. He still has that connection. Still has that understanding. But there's a process because we're talking about in the physical world. So there's the father has the son with him, and the son leaves, and even when he leaves, the image of the father is still in his mind. The image of the son is still in the father's mind. But with regards to Hashem, now by Hashem, before we were created, we can already say the same idea. Before we even were created, this us, as we are in this physical world, was already in God's mind before He even created us. Like it says, because by God, past and future are one. So even though we weren't created, God already had an image ingrained in His mind, so to speak, of us down here below. So what does this mean? For this understood. This the Anasham is sourced in Atzmos, is Baruch Behem Nimlach, and that's the Hashem asked to create the world. Who Inyan Hanasham is Kamoishehem Bechinas Nivra, meaning this that Hashem spoke to Anashamas. It's not Anashamas just as they are in Atzmos. It's Anashamas as they are already down here in this physical world. Because by God, the past and the future, it doesn't have a time bound. It's not time bound. So in the past, so to speak, in the beginning, but it doesn't mean like time-wise, because meaning when Hashem asked the neshamas to create the world, these neshamas He's asking are the same neshamas and in God's mind he sees it, then this is the same neshama as it is down here in this physical world. By the marshal of the Father and the Son, first there's the Father and Son together, then the Son leaves, and then the Father, and then the image is ingrained in his mind when he leaves. But by God, we didn't even need to be created to already have that image edge in his mind. By God, past and the future one. Okay, sorry about that. And like it's known, what does it mean who Hashem asked to create the world? What was Hashem asking really? Hatainug, he was asking the tainug that will happen, the time that Hashem is going to, so to speak, happen for the neshama as it is in this physical world. And Hashem was speaking to our neshama, the same neshama. It's confusing a little bit, but the idea is powerful. The same neshama as it is in Atzmos is the same neshama as is coming down here. And he's speaking to our neshama before we came down. And he's speaking about it and he's saying, should we create the world? Because he realizes that when he creates the world, and then the neshama is going to be down here. It's going to be an amazing experience when the neshama overcomes the challenges of the Mayim Rabim. And so that's what he's asking. He's saying, hey, let's go down. Let's send you down to this physical world. You're going to have Mayim Rabim, and you're going to overcome it. And that's something that it doesn't it doesn't exist over here in Atzmos. And this will explain to us the great ascent, the great, what is achieved by the neshama coming down here. Even though before it comes down, it's sourced in Atzmos, in God's essence. This that we're sourced in God's essence, and these are the people that Hashem is asking to create the world. The neshamas Hashem is asking to create the world. Hashem is asking them with the knowledge that we're going to come down to this physical world, and the neshama is going to be included in the body, and we're going to have these stresses and these tiras parnasa. But he also knows that we're going to be successful in this challenge. And we're going to not lose our connection to God, and we're going to connect to Him. And even though He knows that we're going to do it, this is all potential. Meaning, you reach a higher level, but there's no higher level than Atzmos. But while we're in Atzmos, we haven't done anything actually. And even though He knows we're going to do something, it's like the business, what you need to do to be successful, and you have it all clear, it's all planned out, everything just needs to be implemented. But if it hasn't been implemented, it's all in potential. Potentially, I can make millions, but you haven't made a cent yet. When you the neshama comes down to the body, and it comes down to this physical world, and we have to go through the struggles of life, and we overcome them. Even though the neshama knows before it comes down, it's going to overcome them, it's going to be successful, but it hasn't actually happened. And once it actually happens, that's everything. It's like, I know this is the right person for me, but only once we get engaged, we get married, it's a whole different experience. But I know this person, what's the big deal? I know they're the right person for me. Or my kid, I know he has potential to learn something, but only once he learns it and repeats it and he says it over, that's when I see we know it. And even though we know. And in regards to the shidduch or the business, you can if you think about it for a little bit, you recognize how profoundly different it is from the potential of making the business successful and having all the tools and knowing everything versus actually implementing it. They're two different worlds. And this is also what it means that we say the who did God ask to create the world was the neshamas of tzaddikim, meaning at that point when Hashem is asking, what should we do? Which is at that point only potential. It's only the potential for the neshama to come down and be successful. And that we know that they're going to do it, but they haven't actually fulfilled the intent. That's the neshama's on the tzaddik. Why? Because it hasn't come down to this world and hasn't had to deal with the Mayim Rabim. Well, he doesn't lamata, but afterwards they come down into this physical world. Then we actually fulfill it. Not we potentially fulfill, but we actually fulfill it. Now it's mechinas Baal Teshuvah. Then we become Baal Teshuvah. So before the neshama comes down, it's the tzaddik, which doesn't have to deal with all these issues. But once it comes into this physical and has to deal with those issues, and it does the avodah and it still connects, then we become Baal Teshuvah. Like we said before, in the place that the Baal Teshuvah stands, a tzaddik cannot stand. So the neshama, as it is in Atzmus, that we might think to ourselves is the best, and we, unfortunately, we take on neshama and we drag it to the mad, and we don't connect to God, and we have all these Mayim Rabim, and we're not thinking about God, and we're not doing good. He's saying it's faket. It's the opposite. That when you go through the struggles and you overcome it, you become the Baal Teshuvah, and the Baal Teshuvah is the highest level. Yeah, and so now, and on Monday we'll finish it off with connecting it to this time period of coming back into the physical world and the success we have and the happiness we have going into the physical world because of the fact that we understand that we're going to fulfill this. That the Mayim Rabim, we sort of figured it out. The Mayim Rabim is not there to pull us down; it's there to help us connect. And then we recognize we're getting stressful. It's because I want to connect more to God, and I have to appreciate that. And this is the foray, and this is the Izbaininus, that to contemplate that I know that once I don't listen to the Mayim Rabim and I don't let it pull me down, and I push myself to connect to God, then my neshama, as it is here, connecting to God, is reaching a higher level than my neshama as it was one with God before it ever even came down. To be continued. Have a great Shabbos.